comparison to percent rank based on overall accountability scores compared to schools around the state. So, and in fact, I'm just going to read this bottom portion that you have there. The percent of possible points on school accountability is compared to schools statewide, and all schools are then ranked. The rankings in the chart show Redwood's performance compared to all schools and to Title I schools. For example, in 2023, Redwood was 325 of 328. Title I schools, or 99.1%. Title I rankings in this chart show Redwood as consistently ranked in the bottom 5%, unfortunately. Next, if you follow this chart over the last several years, starting in 2016 on the upper left, the first cohort or turnaround cohort identified in 2016 by being in the bottom 3% of all Utah schools for 2 consecutive years. Next, below that, in the summer of 2021, all other turnaround cohort 1 schools exited. The school leveraged an exception waiver during the pandemic to ask USBE to exit based on other factors. Therefore, Redwood did not have a sanctioned status for the 21-22 school year, although it remained one of Utah's lowest performing schools. The next cohort, if you will. So in fall of 2022, Redwood was identified as a CSI school, which is the lowest 5% of Title I schools in Utah based on the 21 and 22 data. Next, top right, to exit CSI, Redwood will need to score above the bottom 5% of the Title I schools in either the 24, 25, or 25, 26 year and reduce their performance gap from the baseline year to 55% proficiency by 1/3, which is a large number. Finally, if Redwood does not exit, USBE may take several actions to address low student performance, which in summary is this. So what if Redwood does not exit by fall of 2026? According to the statute, if a school designated for improvement does not meet exit criteria, state law authorizes the USBE to intervene by restructuring a district school, which may include contract management, conversion to a charter school, or state takeover, or other appropriate action as determined by the USBE. And they do have various other actions that they could take. That's a lot there, and I know you want to ask questions. Do you want me to go ahead and get through the last couple? Okay. Next, proposed boundary adjustments to Wilson and Lincoln. You can see, again, pretty straightforward. These areas being proposed because there is residential development and growth at Walker. And Walker does not, again, a reminder, does not have room for portable classrooms on their property. So the recommendation is to move some of Walker's students, about 25 from one area and 50, so 25 to Wilson and approximately 50 students over to Lincoln. And also on this one, it's not identified, we've talked about a lot, but still the family shelter is still very much a part of what we've been discussing. There's really no new news there. We're still waiting from the state on whether funding will happen. And so, but it's still a proposal that corner, just that corner where that shelter would be located, go ahead and be moved starting in January in a couple of months to the Wilson boundary. Then quickly, you can see on the map, a large component of this study revolved around DLI Spanish. I won't rehash everything. Many of you have been to these meetings, have heard from these constituents, and it's this area in particular for Valley Crest, Monroe, Hillsdale, and Stansbury. So I'll just simply tell you the proposal at this point, then go over some of that feedback. Remember, we were talking 2 options. Option 1 was going from 4 schools down to 2. So four DLI schools down to 2. Option 2 was a magnet school. and then have one magnet school, and all others are just traditional, so-called traditional schools. Based on the feedback and the meetings and the conversations we've had, the proposal now from the PAC and the DLI task force specifically to the PAC is this: a DLI magnet school to be located at Valley Crest Elementary. Monroe would then absorb the current boundary of Valley Crest and potentially part of Armstrong, and I'll show you that on the map. All DLI Spanish students in the study area would be expected to attend the magnet, except Stansbury students. Stansbury would continue to host or have the DLI program at their school. And that, of course, is that's why it's considered a hybrid model. We're doing both, in essence. We are kind of going the 4-2 model for part of the area. That's for Stansbury, and we still want to do the attempt to have the magnet school. And so if you look at the survey data, one of the things I want to emphasize here is you see at the top 403 respondents. We have almost 800 students, DLI students. However, a lot of families have multiple students, and so we have approximately 600 families represented there. So that's 2/3. That's a great response compared to most surveys. This is not a small sample size. This is a significant sample size. We can't tell exactly. We didn't look at IP addresses and compare that. Perhaps we have a few duplicates, but we felt like that's a pretty dang good sample size. And those that we didn't get responses from, we thought we got great feedback from at the meetings, verbally and emails and in other ways. So you can see what school do they currently attend, and that was pretty evident. At these meetings, how many other children do you have? So we have some idea of what this would look like for the future, and then which best fits your situation, and then finally at this point, which one do you prefer, option 1 or 2? This one deserves a brief explanation, because some people would look at this and say, well, holy cow, Steve, there's almost 80% that prefer option 1, and that is, of course, the 4 schools to 2. As we talked to people about this and then looked at the actual written feedback we got, we weren't surprised really by this. We expected this in a way, because really it was a binary option. Most people were choosing what they thought was going to keep them closest to home. And without all of the answers for a magnet school, we don't have one yet. What does that look like? How's that going to be? Is there transportation? Because of the unknowns, most people were choosing this one, again, which made sense when you read through all of the feedback. But that's how we got to the decision for the hybrid model was, okay, we feel like we are responding to the interest of those communities, allowing Stansbury to remain, and also having the magnet school option. Again, more, which are you inclined to do? What if the board votes for option 2? We can come back to the feedback quickly. Again, just like I mentioned, Valley Crest and Monroe, that would become a traditional student school, if you will, for Monroe. I think it's okay to say, and correct me, Superintendent Horsley, but this would be considered technically a closure for Valley Crest, but yet a reopening at that campus for a different type of school. And so, but Valley Crest and Monroe would become that boundaried school together. Now, again, we recently added this area of Armstrong, which has 50 to 60 students currently to become part of that boundary. The only caveat here is we wanted to make sure that school starts strong. And I believe it will remain. The only thing that could change that in the next month, and I would let you know as soon as possible, is we'll have to do some more survey work, assuming that now that people in the area know that that is the proposal, will they change their minds? So in other words, how many of those DLI students are going to want to go to the magnet school? And then therefore, how many students are left to be part of the traditional Monroe Elementary? And so a lot of that we get in the feedback that we will understand will help determine the final decision recommendation for that area. Finally, it's important to remind everyone, the estimated DLI Spanish Magnet School busing cost for areas between Valley Crest and Hillsdale. These I've gotten from Dr. Gaddy, the Director of Transportation, and if they are even standalone routes, which is most likely, the estimated cost is almost $30,000 each. Of course, if new buses are required, those buses are approximately $180,000. I believe those are today dollars. I do not know what they would be next year. But that, again, is an important component of the potential magnet school. Finally, this is just the updated chart showing updated numbers with current enrollment versus future estimated enrollment. You see a lot of asterisks there, and at the bottom, those are to be determined based on DLI, STEM, and other the family shelter considerations, and that's why I have ranges there. It's so different this year with what families would choose with these DLI options to understand how to forecast those schools. And this is just more of a heads up that we are very aware, and I've already talked to Dr. Gaddy about these school start time adjustments. They aren't talked about a lot. We did get that in some of the feedback from patrons because those are important issues. What time a school starts and ends, people base their daily routines on those start times. And so I wanted to make sure everyone knew that we knew what they were. We have communicated with those that have asked about that, and Transportation Department assures me that it will not change what they do, and they can accommodate that with the current routes and the current number of buses that we do have. Okay. Let me get comfortable. Go ahead.
Julie, now's the time. One question.
Actually, I have just made up my mind to just make an appointment with Steve.
Any other questions?
I have one. Can you remind me how much of Valley Crest currently is special permitting into the DLI program there? Do you have
Almost
a number?
half. I don't have it in front of me, but it's close to
Almost
close to
50% of Valley Crest's current population is special permitting in.
Right, and most of those are, almost all of those are DLI. I can send you those, but that's pretty close.
Thank you. Kim, you had a question? And then Clark.
Yeah, so I feel like the magnet plan, the combination magnet and Stansberry DLI option potentially does great things for Valley, potentially does great things for Moreau, Stansberry, but I feel like it leaves Hillsdale in the lurch. Can you talk a little more about, I know you elaborated on some of this in an email that you sent out, but what are your thoughts there? Why are we not considering other action there at this time?
As a potential closure even of Hillsdale?
Right, or other?
A couple of things. I'll start with, you're right, there are a lot of unknowns, probably more than in most studies because of DLI. And in this case, I mentioned, say, for instance, Stansberry would keep their program. Hillsdale would be expected, if they want to continue with DLI, their first option should be the magnet school at Valley Crest. However, human nature and experience tells us that many will want to be as close as possible to their home, and that program would be Stansberry. They may, as all students may, apply for an open enrollment or special permit to become part of that program. And I imagine Stansberry would accommodate if they had the room to do so. So they'll have the option to do that. When I've talked to Monica Thayer, the principal at Hillsdale, and this is anecdotal, obviously, she believes strongly that most of her students will choose to remain at her school, and that's been the conversations. But we don't know that for sure. So how many of those students will go to Stansberry? How many students will become part of the magnet program, assuming there is even transportation? I've given a chart that says, hey, if 100% go, it looks like this, 75%, 50%, and 25%, to give some ranges for that. Long story short, if all of the students go, let's assume for a minute that all of the Hillsdale DLI students go, that puts them in the smaller range in the, I think around 340, if memory serves. I got a lot of numbers floating in my head these days, but around 340. Is that ideal? No. Is that still, we still have, probably 15 to 20 schools in our district that are in that range. So because the current plan for the PAC, board willing and approved, is, and of course, next year going to the east side or Area 5, the year after that in 2026, revisiting the area just south of what we're doing now. So what I call Mid-Valley area. Now, once we've had a chance to see the dust settle, where all of the DLI students have been for a year and a half, I think then we will be in a much better position to make a long-term commitment on what to do with Hillsdale or other schools in that area once the dust is settled.
And one other question, just on these maps, I find it a little difficult to see where the roads are on these boundaries. For others who are in the same boat as me, for my constituents who want to know, okay, what's this proposal, for example, that Wright Elementary might pick up some students, and we want to know where that boundary actually is. What's the best way for them to figure out what that boundary is, with not being able to tell it clearly from the map?
Right. I can certainly put some maps on the website that have that map layer underneath there so that it's easier to see. Most people in their own boundary, most people when I have these maps up or on posters, they can walk right up because of course they know where they live, and they can kind of take a second and say, well, I live right there even without the streets. However, I get it. It's sure nice to have a street so you know for sure what these look like. So we can publish those and put some extra maps on the website that have the street level layer on them.
Thank you.
Board President, I wanted to speak to those questions. The other slide, just before this with the projections on it, to Board Member
Luke, I can
Chandler's
get that.
previous
Go back.
question.
Not forward or backward, up or down. Sorry.
Keep going, sorry.
Apologize. Which one,
Right there,
Superintendent?
yeah. Just speaking to your question with respect to Hillsdale, I think when I was serving on this committee earlier this spring before a job change,
I remember
the
that.
question I remember coming up in PAC as we analyzed a variety of potential closures was we weren't thoroughly convinced that a number of our families, based on the survey work we did at the time, would leave those schools to actually go attend a magnet in another location. So I think there is probably some wisdom in perhaps waiting to see what the outcome and the impact is. If I look at their projection, 350, 400, that's still one of our smaller ones, but that would be if, in fact, a portion of the, I'm asking.
If almost all of the DLI students leave Hillsdale,
That would be the number. So I guess what I'm saying is if what we felt in those surveys is accurate, if this makes sense, that maybe only 20% of those kids go, then that number is going to be much higher. But we don't know, right? And so I think better to err perhaps on the conservative side of what that looks like before taking the next step towards a closure, which would then put pressure in those areas to be at a higher number. I do love the Stansbury number, though, at a 700. That would be amazing.
Right.
I do believe that's an important point of emphasis. As great as it is in terms of the response rate that you receive to those surveys, there's more than a third in one of the two responses that are undecided.
Right.
That's a massive swing that could go any direction that we cannot predict at this point.
We had dozens of conversations after meetings saying, hey, by the way, I put this on my survey. However, there's some, we could easily change our mind based on this, or this.
And we have seen that in previous surveys and
I said
DLI
yes.
shifts and adjustments.
Because in my mind, I was saying, yes, I know. Yeah.
Well, and can I speak, just to put some context behind Hillsdale. Hillsdale is almost on 3200 West, so we're asking kids to go to 5600 West. So I know those
It's further.
neighborhoods pretty well, and I'm
It's
just,
Across Bangor.
yeah, I'm pretty confident saying not all families are gonna do that. There's a convenience factor of having that
Sure.
school right there.
If there was that was my question, did we look at the busing? Would that include the Hillsdale area?
Yes, so if I go back to that busing just quickly, because it is critical. Sorry, I keep going the wrong direction. let me, maybe it won't. The busing, those numbers that I gave for busing, for some reason Luke gets stuck, but those numbers I gave for busing are just from between Valley Crest and Hillsdale. So it did not take into account further west.
Between Valley Crest and
Yeah.
Hillsdale, or Monroe and Hillsdale
That's okay.
and Valley Crest.
I'll just arrow up and down. There we go. Thank you. So again, at the top, magnet school busing cost for areas between Valley Crest and Hillsdale.
So we wouldn't bus any of the kids in the Monroe
Well,
area? Are they close enough? Is that why the justification for that?
Right. Remember, we would still have a 1.5-mile radius from Valley Crest, and most of those would not qualify.
Okay.
And so now the question becomes, just to be clear, this area says, just like it says, between Valley Crest and Hillsdale. It does not consider at this point areas further west, Magna and parts of West Valley.
But
If the board
they're
wants to
already
do
driving-
that.
I mean, if they're 50% and already
That's-
special permitting, they're
that
driving
was-
their kids already.
That was part of the rationale.
Yeah.
Nothing really changes for them. They're coming already, they're driving already.
Yeah. I have one more question also. So if Redwood, because Redwood Elementary doesn't currently have a DLI program, but they're going to be split into 3 schools and 2 of those do have a DLI program, are those kids going to be able to have any opportunity to participate in the DLI, or only if they're at like a kindergartner and go through the cohort?
I think a lot of that will depend on their native language. If they're native Spanish speakers, perhaps, they often can begin the DLI program in almost any, but that'll be based on an assessment. But others, it wouldn't be fair to them, to those students, to try to enter at a later grade if they hadn't had the previous learning. So
So possibly.
it's possible, sure.
Kim, you had something else?
Sorry, one more, just a request. I appreciate you putting this slide in. Should the magnet indeed be a recommendation to the board next month, I would request that you include information on potential cost of creating a magnet school, including potential busing expenses and whatever other costs we can foresee in that path. So, thank you.
I have another question, and perhaps I'm just not understanding, but West Kearns is a DLI magnet school, meaning you have to test into that school. So the magnet is, they're taking the top of they've got like 15 native speakers, 15 they put it, and that's your class, and so it's like this gifted group. So when you say magnet at Valley Crest, is that the same thing, or
It would not have
completely
ALC.
different meaning? Because my DLI magnet understanding is
Right.
the West Kearns model. So can you walk us through what that looks like at Valley Crest?
And I'll lean, I think Dr. Converse is gone, perhaps, but I'll say this. We do have to be careful with the term magnet, because for different people, that means different things. We've used the term gifted, ALC, magnet, pretty loosely, and even in education, we sometimes get confused on what we're referring to. West Kearns is pretty unique because they have both of those programs, like you mentioned, Spanish DLI and ALC. So they have some different assessments and different ways to rank or prioritize those students. When we say magnet in this case, we're referring simply just to that Spanish DLI program. So there's not an assessment like ALC would be.
Part of the interest from the committee on doing a magnet is to compete in the marketplace. If we provide a school that is attractive to many, hopefully they will choose to come to that school as opposed to leaving us to go to a charter school.
And when we say choose, we mean to come back from a charter school. We're trying to draw these students back into our district.
It's an opportunity to be proactive instead of reactive to some of these other schools.
That was some of the feedback. I talked to some families this summer at some of the nights out, and some of them said, well, the reason why we chose this school is because they start the DLI in kindergarten. So this gives us an opportunity to kind of pull some of those families back. Clark, did you have?
I just wanted more clarification on the word magnet, so thank you.
Right.
Yeah, I had a couple questions. Can you reconfirm for me that the students that would be moved from Walker Elementary to Wilson are not those students who previously were moved from Moss to Walker last year? I think it's the case from the map, but again, it's a little fuzzy in terms of the
I'm
exact
going to go back to make sure.
drawing line.
Here's just the big one. So, sorry, can you say that one more time? The
So,
ones
I
these
wanna-
that would go from Walker Walker to Wilson,
From
or
Walker,
to Lincoln?
From Walker to, well, I think it would be based on that purple cross-section. It's from
I believe
Walker
the
to
Walker to
Lincoln.
Lincoln. So,
Are any of those students that are in that box with the purple lines, are any of those students who were previously moved from Moss Elementary to Walker
years ago.
last year?
I believe, and Superintendent, you jump in if you remember, you were side by side with me on this one. I believe it was all of that area. So in other words, I'll double check, but I believe so. I believe that area that we are proposing going from Walker to Lincoln was part of Moss 2 years ago.
The Bud Bailey Apartments, we held a meeting specifically at that location, which is a little bit further south than this area. Is that correct?
Correct, just
So it's more
below.
closer to the border with,
Correct, it's below the purple area.
Could I ask you for a follow-up on that?
Yes.
That you could check into that?
I will.
And verify if there are in fact any such students who were previously Moss Elementary students, and if so, how many would be involved in this particular proposal of moving now to
I believe
to
so, and
Lincoln?
if, I'm just going to assume for a second that's the case. Obviously, we don't want to avoid that wherever we can.
I agree.
we-
I'm very concerned about it because that
Right.
would be 2 shifts for an elementary student within 3 years, essentially.
Right.
Which would be very concerning, very concerning. My other-
To a population that already has a lot of instability.
Correct, and a lot of mobility and a significant immigrant refugee population that's part of that group. If you were at that Bud Bailey meeting a couple of years ago with, 15 different translators in different languages and so forth. So, and part of the reason for instigating their shift was because of the resources that were available to them at Walker. So I'm sensitive to that as well.
I'm sorry, Bud Bailey is not in that
no, it's
change,
further
right?
south.
Bud
Just
Bailey's
below.
in that
That's
little
right.
area.
I think that's
I
right.
just
So
want to make sure.
that's
So
my
Bud Bailey
request.
stays at Walker?
That will stay
Correct.
at Walker, yeah.
So
making sure.
my nuanced question was respect to his, just for clarification for the board. Do you recall the amount of students that are in that area that's proposed to be moved to Lincoln?
50 approximately.
Thank you.
Right, the total area. And my follow-up question is, how many of those 50 would have been Moss students previously, if any?
I don't think any of them were. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that because I think that because that's 3,900 south.
That's my hope and expectation. I
So-
just would love for you to
Yeah.
confirm
Right.
it. Yep.
Again, just one reminder why. This is not about Lincoln. This is not about boosting Lincoln's numbers. This is about making room at Walker for future development. When I say future, as in that building is going up quickly now and for next fall.
So that goes to, or speaks to my very next question, which is, Walker received a number of students from Moss, for example, 2 years ago or last year even, and we're talking about moving 75 students from Walker to Lincoln and Wilson respectively, and yet Walker is still estimated to increase by 30 students to 700. Is that, and I wanted to understand a little bit better, is that simply a function of the development that's going on around that school in that neighborhood? Or what else is, if anything, is
You bet.
contributing to that dramatic increase in their numbers?
Three things. In talking to Niley, the principal there, more doubling up in that area. People, multiple families living in one home. But more significantly, two things. A significantly increased immigrant population, newcomer population that showed up last year that are still there by the numbers. And this one was, then the residential development. And this can't be emphasized enough. The average residential development apartment complex of 150 is almost, doesn't even hit the radar. But this one is different because it's all subsidized housing. We typically get a lot of student yield out of our subsidized housing. And again, add to that, we don't have the flexibility to just say, hey, let's just drop 3 or 4 reloads there for a couple of years and see if things just level out. We don't have that option.
Because correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the PAC anticipated such dramatic numbers to be at Walker 2 years ago. Is that fair? I mean,
That's correct. I wish.
It was, the enrollment has been much greater than was anticipated
Yes.
originally. Yeah.
Wish they call them forecasts for a reason. I wish we had that crystal
sure.
ball, but these
For
are
sure.
some of the unanticipated things, right?
Yeah, and I'm just wanting to understand that dynamic because,
Right.
like I said, we've still got an estimate now for 2025 of going up 30, and that's with taking 75 students and moving them to other schools.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
But I have a quick question about Orchard. I thought I saw in here somewhere that if the potential closing of Orchard would result in maybe some busing for the students there, and I can't find it now, but maybe I just was looking at a different school, but are all the changes, so the 3 schools at Orchard will be dissolved into, or, absorbed, none of those are busing route changes, like they wouldn't have a bus from, specifically, I'm kind of looking at this Copper Hills corner of the students that would leave Orchard over to Copper Hills. Will any of those be bused, or same
Okay.
on that 41, the 4100 boundary right there? Will any of those go to Whittier?
So
be
this is the
bused?
area in yellow on the far left, the stripe at the bottom corner. That is if you're looking at the east side of Orchard. So that area, striped at the bottom, would receive busing.
What
To-
approximate, how many students is in that section?
That I don't know. Dr. Gaddy could get that for us, but I don't believe it's more than a bus from that area.
Right here. See the stripes right there? Huh? That would be a busing section now.
Yes,
Yes, that's bus.
to go to Whittier.
Do you know about how many students?
Make it on record.
Something I can find you, something I can find out for sure.
Thank you.
So the confirmation is the striped areas would represent eligible busing.
Okay.
There's an option as we refine these to implement that there might be a courtesy stop eligible as well. So when you're asking how many students, again, it's going to be dependent upon in year. Each year, students pop in and out of elementary age. We believe it's less than a bus of students right now. Well, I know it's less than a bus. Elementary kiddos, we can get 84 on a bus.
No.
So we're well under a bus, so we probably have an eligible courtesy stop, and we can see how many other riders we could pick up. I think the eligibility in that area is a couple dozen, and that's out of memory. So please, we will get with Dr. Gaddy to give you specifics, but I wanted to give you what I would call the ballpark of what we would expect in an area of that size.
Well, and that's what some parents were concerned, is that they're
Sure.
pretty far from that
Right.
school that they would be now boundaried into. So
So
there
this,
is some
this
that are
map
eligible.
is the other side, or in other words, the area going to Copper Hills. Now, if you glance at that carefully, or if you look at it, you say, oh, no busing at all. But if you look in the very bottom corner, there's a toenail size busing area. Funny, not funny, but that's one house. That's one house that technically qualifies. We looked that house up, and there are currently no students there. And so I imagine if I lived in that area close to it, I would be trying to find a family to move into that, because that would bring one bus and everybody could hop on. But that's one house. That bottom corner, that stripe is what that is.
Wow.
It technically qualifies.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a clarification, not a question.
Okay?
Steve, on the forecasted school enrollment page, could we go there, please?
Yeah.
I'm just curious how you manage the data here, because we've got Valley Crest technically being closed, moving to a DLI magnet, but there isn't a forecast. I know it's hard to forecast that, but we also have the 370 kids who would have been there. Can you explain how you allocated, what that would, where those 370 kids have gone? Have they been divided between have they been sent all to Monroe? Can you tell me how those numbers
We
worked out?
assumed so far in the forecast that all the traditional students, of course, would be combined with the traditional students at Monroe. And so if you look at Monroe, for instance, that's why it has that gap of 500 to 600. It all depends on how many of the DLI students choose to go next door to DLI at Valley Crest or remain in that area. So,
So are you giving any sort of forecast for Valley Crest?
Valley Crest. Well, Valley Crest would be the magnet. So I don't think we're again planning to do more survey work to see based on this scenario what people would at least commit to at this point, and then then we'll have to decide, and the DLI task force will have to decide, okay, what's our number? What's our magic number to make sure that we can make that school work? But that's just simply why I said Valley Crest closed, however, DLI magnet.
Julie, I think what you're getting at a little bit is what we all want, which is this crystal ball that shows us exactly how many kids want to actually transfer schools to keep that DLI option, how many are going to walk away from that and just stay at the convenience of your local school that I can walk to. I can drop my kids off there on the way to work. And that's what makes this section of the boundary study tricky for me is I don't know that any of us really know how the dust is going to settle. And so I think, we can do all the survey work and try to collect that data. But at the end of the day, I don't know that families are going to really make that choice until it's like, okay, now is the deadline. You've got to choose your school. So how we get that?
I think that's true about the crystal ball, but I also think that we should have enough indicators to know that it would be a healthy, strong school.
Right, but to Clark's part, well, yes, I agree on that. To Clark's point, when we're looking at the pie chart and there's this third missing.
Yeah, I agree.
That's kind of what I'm getting at as far as how can we get an idea of what that third, I don't know.
Well, and I think that the more that you guys have narrowed down your thinking, I think we might be able to be a little more concrete in our surveys. And since you're going to continue to survey, you might be able to get a number that gives us a good-ish idea, right?
I think the surveys will help. The more we market as a district this program, I believe, if it comes to fruition, the more we market it and get people to understand what's really there and what the opportunity is, I think we'll see. The survey will be nice, but it'll change between the end of the survey and next August if that's what happens.
Yeah.
So, and I'll even, in full transparency, throw in one more variable there that we really haven't talked about, but that's just north of there is Armstrong Academy, which is largely a open enrollment school. So I've talked to the principal there. He understands the implications, and we've talked through this, and we'll have to talk to him more about how many they would accept and what that looks like, and he's trying not to cannibalize our other district schools, but at the same time support his own school. So we're aware of that, and it's another moving part to consider.
I think for me, the fact that in that pie chart, we do have 39%, almost 40% say they would go wherever, that's a significant number. And I think if busing were an option, that would only increase. So having two schools in my area that are struggling right now, that are DLI, this to me is really intriguing. I want to see how this works. I want to give it a chance just because I see the complications that it creates for the school that is hosting a DLI program. And I love the option and the opportunity for our kids. I've seen it change kids' lives. I love that, but it puts a huge burden on teachers, on the staff, both the principals at those two schools are just, it's such a struggle in some ways, and so I'm really interested to see how if this were to be viable. Steve, I'm curious, because you had that data, did you aggregate the data for each school, and did we see, from Hillsdale, would most of those kids go, or would they just stay?
I can send you a chart, a table that I came up with, and again, I only used 100%, 75, 50, and 25% to give us some pretty good estimates of if then. if that many went, what would those schools look like in these scenarios? But I can send you that.
But when you gave them the survey, did you
Oh.
have them tell this, we're from this school and that we would do this? Or did you not ask what school they were from? You didn't ask?
No, we
Okay.
did not.
Okay, that's just what I wondered. All right, are there any other questions? Julie will go with you. Did you have something, Superintendent?
That concludes your presentation.
Yes.
I'm asking,
Yes, yes.
just making sure.
It does mine.
With respect to this, just reminding the board about the timeline and the process. This is the PAC's final recommendation. And as such, we would now go back out to the community with these formal recommendations. We'll get updated maps in the foyers of those schools. We'll get digital versions of that so that our principals can then share that out with the updated recommendation piece, and ensure then there's an additional opportunity for our families to yell at Steve and, I'm sorry, provide meaningful feedback to Steve and help us engage and understand and address questions and concerns. And then we would move into a formal recommendation in the November board meeting, depending on the outcome of those meetings. So I just wanted everybody to understand that process and what we're planning on doing moving forward.
And board members will be invited to all of those.
Yes.
Of course.
And also, I wanted to recognize, thank you so much for all of this information, because I think that a lot of that is in response to questions that board members have had, and I feel like this is setting us on a good path, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, there's,
Madam President, no, if we're moving to the next topic, we should recognize that Senator Reeby has joined us in the meeting as well.
yes, thank you, Senator Reeby. Appreciate you being here. All right, thank you, Steve. We appreciate all the work and from you and the PAC on that, so pass on our gratitude to them as well. We do have a first reading. This is Article 10C3, Educator and Student Communications and Social Media. We'll invite Mr. Doug Larson to come up and walk us through that.
Thank you, board members. Just one policy to talk about tonight. You have Article, this is 10C3, Educators and Student Communications through Social Media. There was new legislation this past session that requires us to make sure that we have a communications process that is non-electronic. If we are shooting out electronic advertisements or communications or information to students, that we also have a non-electronic process for doing the same. And so we've added paragraph G to this policy. There was a question by Representative McPherson as well that I wanted to mention. In paragraph C1, he indicated there that you can see we had lined out the sentence, educators shall avoid in-person communications conducted in confined or isolated environments out of sight of others. The reason that sentence it makes sense that that would be questioned, but the reason that sentence was removed is because this policy specifically relates to educator and student communications through social media. We actually have a separate policy, our teacher code of conduct, that addresses in-person communications and that sort of thing, boundary violations in particular. So that's why it was eliminated, and you can see there's a couple of other just minor cleanups, and then subsection G that I present for your for a first reading, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to respond.
I believe we also did ask and make sure that we did include in the references the Utah Educator Standards, which is what references that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Policy people. So that's why, yeah, it's a valid question, but that is why that was struck out. So, any questions? If there's no questions, I will entertain a motion.
I would mention that it's not only in Utah Educator Standards, but it's also in our code of conduct policy. So you've got it
Yeah.
a couple of places, yeah.
I move that we accept Article 10C3, educator and student communications through social media as a first reading.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to accept Article 10C3, Educator and Student Communications through Social Media as a first reading. Is there any further discussion on this? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right,
Thank you, board members.
thank you. We're going to go ahead and turn the time over to Superintendent Horsley for his report.
Thank you. Today marks 72 days of being the superintendent, and I'm pleased to be here and to announce a few exciting things that our team is working on. I want to praise our team. We've got a great group of folks working behind the scenes here to support our teachers and our students. A couple of things I wanted to bring your attention to, and I think I forwarded an email that indicated some of these pieces. We are looking at, as part of the reconfiguration and reopening of Brockbank Junior, at a rebrand of Magna Elementary to become a STEAM academy, and also for Brockbank Junior to become a STEM focused school, and create an educational pathway in those respective communities and give kids some enhanced opportunities. This is after some focus work conducted by Leslie and JD Talbot and some of our folks over in the Family Engagement Department. And what we heard from our residents and our parents in Magna is they would like to see some of those opportunities within the Magna area. So we hope that that will in turn also attract some additional families back from our wonderful charter friends and neighbors back to our wonderful Granite schools. And so we have a great administrator there, Ben Peters. I was actually out visiting with him, was that yesterday? I don't know what day it is. And he's very excited about this opportunity. So we're looking forward to seeing some additional information on that in the coming months. We have, as part of our administrative kickoff, we announced a new district director in the classroom initiative to get our folks here in the district office out into those schools. A lot of them already do so as part of their regular job responsibilities, but it's helpful for our staff in our schools, our teachers, our administrators to feel helped and supported. And as part of that initiative, we'll continue to revise that and amend that, and Dr. Nerden has taken the lead on that. We reviewed that data this morning in our executive team meeting. We have had over 777 visits to 85 schools by 50 administrators since the start of the school year. And I think we're learning things that we are being reminded of things that we have not. I know that I have spent roughly 80% of my time in schools, and it is invaluable. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be there and to see the hard work of our teachers and to be with our students. They're incredible. Very grateful, and props to Julie. She came to me and she said, we really need to get on top of this Legislator Day in the Classroom Initiative. And I'm like, great, would you take that on, please? Because I'm kind of new and I am drinking a lot of water right now. And she gracefully said yes, and then she told me what I needed to do, and I did it. And props to her for pulling off a huge logistical challenge and difficulty. I think we have seen the benefits from that already, and we'll continue to benefit from those ongoing relationships with our incredible elected officials in cross collaboration and ongoing support. I was out at Valley Junior High School and was in a classroom space, and I just want to recognize the significant challenge that we're faced with and the honor and privilege that we're also faced with simultaneously. And that is the 20,000, that is 20,000 multi-language learner students in our schools. And I was in a Valley Junior High classroom, and I was attempting to help this student fill out a survey. And I'm like, you're just gonna move your finger over here to this button? And he's like, un poquito. And I'm like, I have no idea how to speak Spanish. I'm like, Mitch, where are you? And just to see, just even some basic skills are not lacking. These students are not lacking in intellectualism. They just don't speak the language, and that is, we need to, I'm grateful to have some of our tremendous legislators here. We need help. We need help to be able to provide our at-risk kids the language services and acquisition skills, because we do have incredible teachers doing wonderful things to help support these students. I could tell you a dozen other stories just in the last few days that are comparable to that visit at Valley Junior High, but it was just very impactful on me. I also want to give a shout out to Mr. Campos at West Kearns Elementary. We were there with, I don't even remember who we were there with. Was it Matt Imus, state school board member? And we had come past his classroom and they were boring. They were out in the halls talking. So I dropped into Mr. Campos' classroom and he was doing reading assessments with some of his kids. And then some of his kids were over here in this workstation and this. So I was going around and he was dressed up because they were having, what was it, Harry Potter days or something?
Harry Potter STEM night.
Okay, and I tell you what, Mr. Chaffin looks just like Dumbledore. Not at all. Not at all. But he was dressed like him, and Mr. Campos was he's like, oh crap, the superintendent is in my room, and I've got this kid here who is freaking out, and I'm not going to tell you the kid's name, but he was freaking out. And so we kind of got him settled, and I'm like, I'm just going to walk around if that's okay. And he's like, oh, that's great, but I'm dressed for the Harry Potter thing. This isn't how I normally dress. He was so nervous, and I was like, hey, man, you're cool. I think you look great. I'd get a picture with you, but you're really busy right now. So I hung out there for a few minutes, and then I realized I was supposed to be with the group of adults. So I excused myself, and I walked out in the hall, and I was looking down one way, and I looked down the other way, and I don't know where the adults went. And then I see this child that was having a difficulty and a struggle bolt from the room and make his way to the restroom down the hall. And I thought, I don't think Mr. Campos knows that this student has left his room. And so as I walk over to the door, he comes out and he's got this look on his face. He's like, did you see? And I'm like, yes, he went down that way. And he's like, would you? And I says, I've got your classroom. Go take care of that. And so I got to hang out with his class, and they were excellent for me. They did a great job. I don't know if the tie scared them. But I just, again, a shout out to the tremendous work of our educators and the challenges they faced with. He was on his little device. He's like, I need a BHA down here right away. Can I please get a BA? And poor Dumbledore was in the cafeteria and probably couldn't hear him. So I went down after, and they got him taken care of. But shout out to Mr. Campos and that wonderful I think it was third grade class. So that's my report.
Thank you, Superintendent. Clark?
Just briefly, thanks to Julie for all of her efforts. I had the opportunity to be in a couple of schools this week, one with State School Board member Sarah Reel, and the other with State Senator Nate Bluen, and it was a tremendous opportunity on both days. So I'm appreciative of your efforts, Julie. And that's all I have to report on further this evening.
Karen?
First of all, Stacy, will you add to my good news minute that I thoroughly enjoyed being invited to Valley Junior High's faculty lunch to celebrate their proficiency award? Even though it's not the good news minute, if I say it now, can you add it to the minutes? Okay, thanks. I felt really bad. I looked over that in my notes and I was like, yeah. Okay, here's my real update. As far as benefits committee, I was unable to go because I was home recovering from a recent surgery, but I had these notes sent to me. Thank you, Patrick. But there's a lot of good things happening in the insurance world for us. I mean, insurance is expensive, as we all know, but a couple of really good things. Over the summer, there was a big push. Employees are required to get a biometric screening every year for insurance purposes. And so they did this little contest that if you were getting your biometrics, typically a lot of employees wait until the end of the year because there's a little bit of a punitive thing with, I can't remember the cost, Michelle, what is it? $10 a month if you don't hit your biometric screening in a year. Anyway, so you can imagine how December is a little crowded, and the clinic gets overscheduled, and then they're frustrated. So a lot of effort and creativity went into saying, hey, you know, they've got the month of July off. How about we do a contest and try to get as many biometric screenings by July 31st, and then they do a drawing, and then 10 employees that win get their December insurance premium paid. So that's the incentive to get in earlier. So I'm telling you that because we doubled the biometric screenings this year compared to last year, which is huge because overall, the purpose of the Wellness Center is preventative. Of course, we want to be there when things go wrong and there's PT and there's, you know, you could, if you're sick or whatever, but the concept is built on that we want to get people in and identify problems and give them a case manager and be able to help them manage their health, not just when they're sick. So that's a cool thing to report. We're doing pretty good on medical. Pharmacy's a little high. Dental's really high because of inflation, so we've got to take a look at that. Open enrollment began yesterday and ends October 16th. So for our employees on benefits, please take the time to fill out your open enrollment. Even if they're not what? Even if they don't take benefits, they got to do it. Oh, yes. Yeah, you have to actually declare that you're declining the benefit, if that is your choice. Yep. Thanks, Michelle, for that. Lastly, we have some benefit fairs. They're October 3rd, 9th, and 16th. That's for coming to get your questions. But also another thing I'm really excited about is there's a mammogram bus coming. And it'll be here at the district office, and select health days are October 2nd and 3rd, and Regents, Blue Cross Regents, is October 9th and 16th. And so depending on which insurance plan you have, make sure you pick your day accordingly. So a lot going on. Fall is really busy for insurance because that's where we're trying to get everybody registered. That's all I have.
Thanks, Karen. Chris?
Okay, I just want to report our budget committee met today. We finished up our capital report of kind of where we're at on our timeline and some of our options. We will, I asked Todd to bring us a calendar of what month we have what financial obligations. So if we are approving a budget one month or whatever, so that we can actually put in some capital discussion as a board study session, possibly in January is what we're looking at. So we'll just watch for that calendar, and I'll share it with board members as soon as I get that, of the months that we have obligations we have to fulfill for budget and school fees and things like that, so that we can work in this capital. We have a lot of good information that Todd has researched for us and got us together some slides that we can talk about capital projects for the upcoming years. And then also, I just wanted to thank John Welburn and Ben for our administrative appointment at assistant principal at Matheson Junior High. That's been a long time ask, and I know that's a big lift for them to have to do those in the middle of the year. But I appreciate the proactiveness of that leading into the opening of Brockbank. So those kids have somebody who they can recognize in their building when they move over and also move up, because we'll be adding our 6th graders. So I appreciate Mitch taking over that role of coordinating these efforts. And also, I know for John that gives extra pressure to, now we have to get a principal for Brockbank. So I just appreciate all the efforts being made in that regard for the community, looking out for all the changes coming. So thank you. Oh, and I just wanted to say, Connie, congrats on 21 years as a board member. Wow.
Connie?
All right, I serve on the Parks and Rec Advisory Board from the county. That is in law that they have, the school districts are represented, so all 5 school districts. But October's a fun month, so our county rec places have lots of activities. Holiday Lions has a carnival on October 18th. Magna has hotcakes, Halloween hotcakes on October 11th. And those 2 are the ones within our district. Also, the county is trying hard to reconnect, is how they say, the Central Jordan River. So they're asking people to come and help with ideas to make the Jordan River from 21st South to 56th South, which takes all of our district in, well, and Murray. But, so they're going to the libraries. They will be at the county library where Granite was on the 28th, and then at Redwood, on Redwood Road, on 3100 South about on November 12th, Taylorsville in the library there on November 13th, and Mill Creek on November 14th. So they're trying really hard to get all of us involved in trying to improve the Jordan River. And we live near the Jordan River, and it's amazing how much they've done the last few years to help clean it up and make it much more attractive. So there at Wheeler Farm, they have some activities for the whole month. It's Pumpkin Days from September 27th till October 31st. And then they have a boutique on October 11th. And then Owl-a-Ween every Wednesday in October from 6 to 7:30, where the Hawks, they'll come and do a demonstration. Then they have parties, and that's a cost that you can get a hayride and do a maze there. And and that's what goes on for all of the month of October if you're interested. And that's it.
Thanks, Connie. Kim?
No district community councils have happened yet, so I have no update other than to say October 29th, if you're interested, 6 p.m., Kearns Junior will be our first meeting of the school year.
Do we know what we're, yeah? Is that yours?
Yes, and we have not said that yet.
Okay, just wondered.
I have a USBA board meeting on Friday, and so if you have any, we'll be discussing feedback from Lawmaker in the Classroom Day. So if you have feedback that you would want me to share with the other board members across the state, will you send it to me before then so I can share it? And I will also be taking notes and putting them in board book, so look for it.
Julie, I have a question. At the USBA meeting we were at, the regional meeting, they talked about some email we were going to get with a form we had to fill out now for board members. Would you ask about that? I got an email, but I'm like, is that the one they're talking
have no
about?
idea
Would
what
you
it was
check
about.
on that for us?
There was a survey?
It wasn't a survey. It was
No.
like this form we had to
Let's-
fill out.
Let's talk after.
Okay.
Yeah. So will you just ask about that?
Yeah.
show me what it is,
Yeah.
forward it to me.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, thanks, Julie. As for mine, calendar committee, this is like a one time a year, maybe 2 times a year thing. But I do want to just remind everybody that there is a survey that went out just about a general preferences. So anybody who is out would like to take that survey, please do so.
And you're on the calendar committee now.
Yes, it's just one time a year, really. And I was told I was told by a certain junior high student in our district, oh, actually, he's high school now, high school student, that we should always schedule November 1st as a day off. No, it's the day after Halloween. We'll see how that goes. I mean, yeah. As far as law and policy, I did give you guys just a really brief update. Just as a heads up, we did fill as a committee that we needed to talk about the sensitive materials updates that we have. And we are bringing that to the study session because we are going to be asking you to come up with a couple names for us for the committees and how they're going to operate. We want to make sure you're clear on that and how that happens. So that will be what part of our study session is. And I think everything else, I updated you guys in the email, but I just want to make sure you guys understand that's what we're talking about. With that is all I have. And if there's nothing further, I will entertain a motion.
I move to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.